Hi guys, Reform UK is a simple party with simple solutions to complex problems. I think this is where they're able to push their policies with very little scrutiny, especially on channels like GB News. So of course, when it comes to the problem of asylum seekers crossing the channel to reach Britain, one of Reform's main ways of dealing with this is to push back the boats or simply take people back to France. Lee Anderson, one of Reform's MPs, raised a recent story where a British vessel took asylum seekers back to France, but there's a problem with his narrative here.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now then, when I was in the migrant camps in northern France last year, the migrants told me and some of my colleagues that one of the deterrents that would stop them coming is if they were turned back in the channel or sent back the same day. Now, we saw the Border Force Agency take a boatload back just last week. So will the Home Secretary now, with that advice, grow a political backbone and order the Border Force to send the boats back the same day?
Yeah.
Okay, before we get to Yvette Cooper, does anyone actually believe what he's saying here? That he met with migrants and they told him, well, you know, if they returned us the same day, we would just stay in France. We would give up on any hope of getting to Britain. Does anyone actually believe that? Now, the other point that he raised, which is actually true, a British vessel, I think it was Border Force, picked up migrants in the sea and took them back to France. But what Lee Anderson didn't mention is that they were operating in French waters at the time. So what happened was some boats left Calais, they got into trouble, they signalled for help. There was a British vessel along with French vessels in the area at the time, and the French vessel picked up some, and the Border Force vessel picked up some people as well. And of course, the closest place to take them to was France, was Calais. So they were returned to Calais. This was cooperating with the French authorities. So the French said, yes, you can take them here. It probably makes sense to take them back here.
Well, the honourable member refers to the case where there was an incident in the Channel and where there was cooperation between the Border Force and between the French authorities that did also involve returning people to the French coast. That operational cooperation, I think, is really important. But I would just say to him, cooperation is the really important word here. Because if we want to prevent gangs operating and organising, if we want to prevent boats reaching the French coast in the first place, we have to work closely not just with France, but with Germany, with other European countries, with the countries through which some of the supply chains are operating as well. And it's that cooperation that I know quite often he and some of the others in his party have refused. So that cooperation will be important, and it's our best way to stop the criminal gangs.
Okay, Yvette Cooper is not being completely honest here, because it wasn't about criminal gangs, it was about people who were in trouble in the waters around Calais. Now, I'm not an expert on these things, so let's instead listen to an expert. Zoe Gardener.
Seriously, we need to address the reform position that's also supported by Nigel Farage that pushing back migrant boats at sea is any kind of a solution either to migrants drowning or to asylum seekers coming to the UK in general. Like absolutely everything else they say, this isn't actually a new idea, but it's an old, tried and failed one. It was in fact one of the more ludicrous and dangerous suggestions made by Priti Patel. Remember when she was Home Secretary? Before Braverman? We really have been spoilt these last few years, haven't we? Patel put pushing back the boats in the Channel on her anti-migrant legislation back in 2021, and it didn't work out. And why is that? Well, for a start, the UK Border Force said they wouldn't do it. They threatened to take strike action if she tried to force them to do something so immoral and dangerous. Next, she tried to bring in the Navy. They always want to bring in the Navy, don't they? But the Navy also told her to go whistle. The Armed Forces Minister made it quite clear the Navy would not participate in such operations as they cannot be carried out safely. Obviously, the French would have absolutely nothing to do with it either, and that left her in a bit of a pickle. Patel eventually had to back down after a couple of months and scrap that plan. And even though she was replaced by Braverman, who you'll remember went harder in nearly every single way to try to force through more depravity and cruelty in the name of her failed attempt to stop the boats, she never even went near it. And why is that? Well, we don't actually have to stick to the theory of it being dangerous. We know it's dangerous. They do pushbacks in Greece, and it's both deadly and illegal. And all the while, it has not stopped migrants from reaching Greek shores, apart from the ones, obviously, that the Greek Coast Guard have drowned, which Reform Party's pushback policy is just another lie. It isn't any kind of a real solution. Nothing they suggest is new, innovative, humane in any way, shape or form, or practically workable. They are just there to sell us their snake oil to build their own careers. They are never going to be providing real solutions for our communities or for migrants and refugees. Never believe them when they pretend to care about migrants drowning. We know they don't. They are just the worst elements of our politics, and we really need to be standing up to their lies.
Well said, well said. You know, and this is the problem with people like Lee Anderson. Lee Anderson needs to be called out. He's not providing a solution. When he mentioned about bringing asylum seekers back to France, he of course left out, he didn't include the information about, well, these people were in French waters and Border Force were cooperating with the French to return them with the permission of the French government or the French authorities. This sort of stuff needs to be called out. And I think Labour, when dealing with questions like this from Reform, need to shut it down pretty quickly. Because if they don't, you're going to see more and more questions from the likes of Lee Anderson and Richard Tice and maybe even Nigel Farage if he bothers to turn up. And they're going to use it as a platform. They're going to ask these complex problems solved with simple solutions. And these simple solutions don't exist. The idea of turning back boats, of course, risks lives. And if you want to return asylum seekers to France, well, you need to have an agreement with the French. But these are people, as we keep saying, who don't want to stay in France. They want to arrive in Britain. So if you want to avoid them crossing the channel in these boats, well, then you have to create safe routes, which Zoe and others have already pointed out is the practical solution to this. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.